Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021. It is a Tuesday, so that means it's time for us to do another segment of Toolbox Tuesday. And of course, I'm keeping it along the lines of pride and queer themed topics. This week, I'm going to be talking about the role of religion and spirituality in helping to heal and helping to promote post-traumatic growth and helping to promote healthy identity formation for our queer clients, for our queer friends. One thing I've been doing in every segment is I've been doing the best that I can with announcing all of the letters that I know of that are represented in the long string of letters that kind of represents the queer banner. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex. Add to that asexual, pansexual. Of course, there are a bunch of things that I am missing, but as far as like terms to Google, do that. As far as like things to look out for when it comes to, deepening your education and going further into continuing education in queer topics, go ahead and take a look at some gender studies and take a look at what some of those terms are and what it means to kind of have that kind of identity. But for today, the role of religion and spirituality in counseling. So first thing is first, gotta have a definition, or gotta have a way of differentiating between the two, spirituality and religion, because they are not the same, and a lot of times they are not considered the same. In some places they are, in some contexts or in some individuals they will say, that the whole purpose of their spirit or their religion is their spirituality or so on and so forth. But for this purpose right here, we're gonna differentiate them. And so spirituality on the one hand is going to be defined as an animating force in human life. So there's a sensitivity to the spirit or the soul, which may or may not be connected to any religious practice to begin with. And then religion is going to be defined as the social construct that's built around a shared spirituality. So those are going to be important. If anybody wants to, you can kind of take a look at some of the research that's out there about the role of religion and spirituality in counseling, and you can take a look at how some of the researchers who pioneered this aspect of the field differentiated between the two and how they define spirituality or how they learn to recognize it in counseling, in therapy. One of the other things that I do want to talk about today is assessing for the history of abuse within the context of spirituality and religion. I do also want to talk about affirming versus disaffirming faiths and how you utilize those in the therapy room and how you kind of balance back and forth between those as a part of leading towards health and post-traumatic growth. And then I do want to talk about the role of counselor spirituality in session, because it is very true that when therapy is happening, our patients, our clients, our consultants, the folks that we are working with are in the room, but so are we. And that also does play a role, and our spirituality comes with us just like it goes everywhere with the folks that we work with. And so we have to learn how to recognize when our own personal faith shows up in the counseling room and how we want to account for that to make sure that we're behaving in the most ethical way possible. So after having defined and differentiated spirituality and religion, assessing for the history of abuse is going to be super duper important. And you cannot rely on the fact that your patient or your client is just going to tell you the things that have happened to them within the context of the church. Why might that be? Well, we have a tendency to be a bunch of victim blamers in this society. And so if someone that we're working with doesn't want to be, held to blame for the abuse that they suffered, then they're probably going to not tell anyone, especially if they've been introduced to victim blaming in the past, or if they've had to endure that in the past. So do not, under any circumstances, assume that because your client has come out to you as queer, that they are also just going to come out to you and tell you all of the things that they have gone through. You gotta ask. You gotta care enough to ask. And one of the ways that you demonstrate that you care is by asking hard questions. Tell me about the role of spirituality in your upbringing. What were some of the beliefs that your family held about God or about faith in your home? As an example of some assessment questions that you can ask. And then you can ask, well, tell me, how do you integrate spirituality or religion into your life right now? What role does it play? How does it help you, or how does it, lead to more suffering? Conversion camps are a form of abuse. If you are working with someone who has been to a conversion camp, or who has done some pray the gay away, or who has been a part of any kind of experience that is meant to classify their sexual or affectional orientation as a shameful thing that has to be dealt away with, that's abuse. Exorcism, shame-based approaches in general are abuse. Sexual experiments and exposures are abuse. And allowing LGBTQI children or people to be bullied in your presence at school or in any other place is also a form of abuse or maltreatment. And furthermore, inappropriately rationalizing maltreatment makes you a coward. So if you are the kind of person who believes that a little tough treatment on the playground or a little maltreatment is likely to toughen someone up or help them be better prepared for the world, you yourself are participating in abusiveness, and you yourself are kind of a coward completely. So you have to do away with that kind of thinking to move into this place of healing. Other ways to assess for abuse, you can ask your clients to tell you, the rose and thorn activity about participating in a religious community or a spiritual community. And that can be like an icebreaker while you're doing your biopsychosocial assessment. Recognizing affirming and disaffirming faiths. So I think that any faith can be either affirming or disaffirming. It can be both. Like, it's not like a static thing. And it really depends on the way that a congregation or a spiritual community chooses to interpret spiritual doctrine. So a disaffirming religion or faith will collectively interpret doctrine in a way that produces shame. So not guilt, because we as humans do a bunch of questionable things that we do have to be accountable to each other for, but shame is a very different emotion than guilt. It functions very differently. And so interpreting spiritual doctrine in a way that produces shame is disaffirming. So then conversely, interpreting spiritual doctrine in a way that promotes divinity, that promotes healing, that promotes, redemption, that promotes strength and triumph. Those would be the affirming therapies, and those would be the messages that you would want to include when you are working with your folks who do want to explore the role of spirituality in their therapy. When it comes to being in session with someone who's queer and you're talking spirituality and you're talking God, I would definitely kind of cite the work, the role, like the idea of like person-centeredness, in that it is absolutely true that the space that we are providing is for our clients or for the people that we're working with, and it's also absolutely true that we are in the counseling room too. And so we do have to do a very good job at recognizing when we are inappropriately wielding our own spiritualities, when we are inappropriately wielding our own beliefs, when we are inappropriately kind of trying to guide the folks that we're working with towards a way of thinking and understanding that represents something that resonates with us over something that resonates with who they are authentically. So even if our faiths are great, they are phenomenal, even if our faiths do help us heal, it's going to be super duper important that the work that we do leads them to their process and not through our process. So that is really like the last thing that I want to say about that. Thanks for joining me for this Toolbox Tuesday. I hope you have found it helpful, and I will see you next week.